Okay, so we're going to talk about the Israel-Arab War, which is incredibly complicated, and this map is a basic rundown of it. Try to follow along. So we talked about how the UN takes over the partition of Palestine. So on November 29th, 1947, the UN adopts Resolution 181, which recommends partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, where Jerusalem will be internationally administered. So if you look at this first section here, right, that's what's happening here. The purple part will be Israel, the orange part will be Palestine, and that little green dot is Jerusalem. Now, previous to this, that whole region was Palestine. Okay? So, the Jewish leadership accepts the partition plan. They say, you know what, we'll take that, that's fine. But the Arab leadership says absolutely not. Not just in Palestine, but in the surrounding countries of Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and say, no, absolutely not. With the refusal of the partition, the war begins. And what happens is, essentially, it starts with a civil war, okay? Within Palestine, there is a civil war between the Jewish and Arab communities in here. Now, again, there's been tension between these sections for decades because, you know, all the promises Britain made and all this stuff, and you've got people coming in and taking land from the other place and making it their own, which becomes problematic. And so the first part of the war begins on November 1947, pretty much right after the U.S. partition resolution. The big events of this are the Deir Yassin massacre, which is a massacre of Jewish forces in April of 1948, and an Arab attack on a medical convoy in Jerusalem. So the Arabs are attacking Jewish people, Jewish forces, and they attack a medical convoy. And then during all of this, the British forces start to leave. Remember we said in the last video that Britain was going to leave Palestine. The British forces start to withdraw, which leads to a bigger power struggle in the area, because both the Palestinians and the Jewish, I shouldn't say Palestinians, the Arab fighters and the Jewish fighters want control of the key strategic areas so they can take back control of the country. Now, Jerusalem, the internationally administered region, is going to become one of the most significant confrontations, because this is the religious city of Jerusalem, but it's also very strategic in terms of importance. If you look at where it is, that's going to be very important. And everybody who's fighting is trying to gain control of access to Jerusalem. So, the Israeli forces are trying to break into Jerusalem because you really need to control the roads into Jerusalem and into really in any war. You need to control the roads to the place you want control of, otherwise you're never going to get control. The Israeli forces cannot break through the Arab blockade, which is going to send them on an alternate route to try to break in and to supply the city. In the same year, in the same month, in April 1948, we get our first major offensive of the war by the Jewish Defense Force. And the objective is to stop the siege of Jerusalem from the Arabs and secure the entrance road from Tel Aviv for themselves. Okay, so the goal of this offensive operation, called Operation Nachshon, is to break the siege of Jerusalem and secure the road from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And the operation by the Jewish Offensive Forces is pretty successful. They end up capturing several villages along the way, which helps at least for the moment, ease the blockade of Jerusalem. And then we enter what is considered the second phase of the war, which starts in May 1948. And this is kind of when it changes from a civil war to an international war, because before there was no official state of Israel. And in May of 1948, the state of Israel is officially declared. And the United States and the Soviet Union recognize Israel as its own independent country. So, almost immediately, we go to this second phase here, where this creation of this state of Israel forces the neighboring countries of Jordan, Egypt, and then up here, Syria, and further over, Iraq, to intervene, because they don't want Israel to be an independent nation run by a Jewish population in an Arab majority region. And this is where we get conventional warfare now. The armies are organized, they're getting military supplies. This is not a civil war anymore, it is a coordinated plan. And if you look at all these green arrows, you can see the invading Arab armies pushing in and trying to push Israel back. So we go from this big section here to this smaller section here where they're pushing back Israel and bringing it down. Then, in 1948, in July, the Israeli forces worked together they were already working together, but they create a new operation with the goal of taking back that territory that they've been pushed out of. And again, because they took that road to Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, they want to take down some more towns. And what this does, as you can see, is that it's going to lead to a lot of Palestinian Arabs being displaced from these areas because the Jewish Israel fighters are pushing them out. Then, in October of 1948, we get another operation where they're pushing into Egypt. And so you can kind of see how Israel starts to push back here. They're pushing the Palestinians back down here, and they're pushing back into Egypt, they're pushing back into Jordan. Once again, their goal is to break a blockade, in this case the Egyptian blockade, and they want to open the road up into the Negev desert, which actually, as you may be able to figure out, is successful for the most part. And Israel forces are able to capture the city of Beersheba, which creates a corridor to the Negev desert, which allows Israeli forces to meet up with more Jewish settlements that are out there. And essentially, by the end of this war, there's just a ceasefire here where the UN and people outside of the war decide that, we need to just, kind of like in Korea, we just need to come to an agreement on how to end this conflict, because it's ongoing and it's going back and forth and it's not very successful for anybody. And so the war ends in 1949 through a series of armistice agreements that are negotiated separately between Israel and each invading country. So Israel ends up signing armistice agreements with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. But one of the biggest issues here is that it has eliminated Palestine as an independent nation. By recognizing Israel as a nation in 1948, Palestine no longer is recognized. And all of the Palestinian people are now refugees in their own homeland. And we are going to talk about the agreements and how this affects things later on in a different video. That is the end of the Israeli-Arab War, and again, just more conflict in the region of the Middle East. So stick around.